For the past few months, the African continent has been in the spotlight due to U.S. President Donald Trump's unfounded claims of a so-called white genocide taking place in South Africa. What began as a blame game has escalated into a series of diplomatic moves, culminating in a full-blown spectacle at the Oval Office last week. Ironically, Trump's ambush appears to have strengthened South Africa's position. President Ramaphosa has received widespread support within South Africa following the meeting. Now more African nations and heads of state are publicly rallying behind Pretoria. Among them is Ghana's President John Mahama, who has called Trump's attack on Ramaphosa an insult to the entire African continent. President Mahama recently penned an op-ed in The Guardian, where he highlighted key points about African unity and how the destinies of African nations are inextricably linked. He recalled how the echoes of apartheid's wrath were felt miles away in Ghana during his youth. He emphasized that the racial persecution of black South Africans was rooted in a system that was legally enforced. Now, 3 decades after the end of apartheid, white South Africans make up less than 7% of the population, yet still control over 70% of the nation's wealth. According to Ghana's president, even today, there are areas in South Africa where only white South Africans are allowed to own property, live, and work. He rejected the notion that black South Africans are driven by a desire for revenge, noting that half of the population was born after the apartheid era and that the pain of that period is no longer fresh in their minds. Mahama also condemned the misinformation and false claims presented by Trump in the Oval Office as supposed evidence of a white genocide. While Mahama may be the first African head of state to publicly respond to Trump's accusations, regional bodies have already expressed strong support for Pretoria. Earlier, the African Union condemned the executive order cutting aid to South Africa, describing it as a neo-colonial attack on African sovereignty. BRICS, of which South Africa is a member, has also expressed solidarity with Pretoria. The South African Federation of Trade Unions branded Trump's actions as imperialist and racist, arguing that they undermine South Africa's sovereignty and its efforts to address historical injustices. Back home, South Africans are rallying behind President Ramaphosa after the tense White House meeting, praising his response as both dignified and strategic. "What he did was powerful," said one South African. "Personally, I think Donald Trump believes he's the leader of the whole world, but Ramaphosa showed him that's not the case. In South Africa, we believe in unity. That's why we call ourselves the Rainbow Nation. As not just South Africans, but people across Africa have rejected Trump's claims and voiced their support for Pretoria. Trump is doing this because he comes from a showbiz background. He thinks running America is like running a reality show, but it's not. Even Americans are embarrassed by their president. So for Trump to try and humiliate an African president, he should come here and see the reality. We can show him videos of white people in South Africa pinning a black man in a coffin and setting him on fire. Why doesn't he show that video?" Another commentator added, "The allegations raised at yesterday's meeting felt like bullying not just of South Africans, but of all African people. While Trump may have believed that inviting President Ramaphosa to the White House and confronting him about an alleged white genocide would strengthen his position, the outcome seems to have had the opposite effect. South Africa's stance is now gaining broader recognition. For now, that support is growing primarily within Africa, but as more prominent voices weigh in, it could shape a wider global perception."
Dignified and strategic.
What he did, because like really those Americans, I think especially me personally, I think Donald Trump, he thinks is a leader of the whole world. So I think what he did, Ramaphosa, to prove them that we don't have no separation in this country. We believe as South Africans. That's why we call ourselves the Rainbow Nation.
Not just South Africans, but people across Africa have rejected Trump's claim and backed Pretoria.
So why Trump is doing this is because he comes from a showbiz background of doing reality shows. And he thinks that ruling America is a reality show. It is not. America and Americans are saying that they are being embarrassed by their president. So for Trump to try and embarrass an African president, I think what he should do is to come here so that we show him videos of white people in South Africa pinning a black man in a coffin and later putting him ablaze. Why is he not showing that video?
The allegations that was raised yesterday for the meeting that they had yesterday, for me, I feel that those allegations were uncalled for, because it is like they are bullying the South Africans and also African people.
So while Trump may have believed that inviting President Ramaphosa to the White House and confronting him over alleged white genocide would strengthen his position, the outcome appears to have had the opposite effect. South Africa's stance is now gaining broader recognition. For now, that support is growing primarily within Africa. But as more prominent voices weigh in, it could shape a wider global perception.